Are you a warrior of light? Did you ever get the feeling that you were here to do something special? And that maybe this was your time right now in this crazy year we call 2020? Well, I've got good news for you, warriors of light. If you stand for justice, if you stand for freedom, if you stand for truth, then this is the mission for you. It doesn't matter what background you come from, what your religious beliefs are, what your job is, or how you walk in this lifetime. If you are a warrior of light, as I say these words now to you, you will know it in your heart. And if you feel the call to arms touching you, please come and join this mission, Mission 2020, Operation Warriors of Light. The group is on Facebook and we need your light now. I will see you in there. Hola, wizards and wappos and whappers, wherever you may be. Welcome back to the Pursuit of Happiness's Sat Chat. And today I have the great pleasure of introducing you to Patricia Cori, who is a world-renowned author, public speaker and activist for human rights and animal rights, which is very important, a self-proclaimed warrior for planet Earth. So definitely up my street, anyone who knows me. A proven psychic and sensitive, and she has been exploring mysticism, philosophy, ancient civilizations, metaphysical healing, spirituality, and unexplained mysteries of the world. And she also teaches on these subjects internationally. So she's also been a way shower for some time and a visionary, and she has connections to shamanism, and she's written books and just so much. There's so much to tell about Patricia. So without further ado, I'm just going to let Patricia tell you a few things about herself. Hello, Patricia. Welcome to the show.
Hello, darling. Thank you. Thank you for that wonderful introduction.
My pleasure.
You want me to talk about myself? I'm not real good at talking.
Why don't you start a little bit at the beginning? You know, because I'm always interested in the path that leads people to what I call, you know, the weird side of life. You know, how do we all end up over here on the weird side of life?
Well, you know, many people have already heard, but probably you've got viewers that don't know me yet. So I will just start by saying that this journey of my life that involves star consciousness and, you know, the path of examining the mysteries, if you will. It began at a very young age. At 4 years old, my mom said I came into the kitchen and out of the blue told her that I wasn't from this universe. And, you know, I'm no spring chicken, so that was back in the day when children, we really didn't have this language that we have now, the metaphysical jargon of our day didn't exist really back then. So my mom said, she recounted this to me because I didn't remember it. What? What do you mean? Where are you from? And I said, I'm from another universe, but you're not ready to know that yet. So I just will sit with it. And I walked out, and that was my first clue that, you know, I love everything reincarnation. So I love the idea that children at a young age bring through the memories and then slowly get it beaten out of them by society, school, parents, etc. But fortunately, my mom protected it. So all of my life, I've been free to explore it. My mother used to say, just don't tell your father these things. Because he was not of that persuasion. And so I grew up very open and never had to reopen it because children shut down and then, you know, so many people have to try to reopen. And I've always been a very open psychic and visionary. And let's say that in the course of my life and the many experiences that we all have, I knew more and more, I had memory more and more of many, many past lives and the fascination with so many civilizations. And you and I have talked about the fact that we'd love to explore Atlantis, the Mayan civilization. I've been to these places and explored with very powerful shamans, as far as Atlantis. I've been there in other lifetimes. And I may just be there now because I live now in the Azores Islands, and the people here know that this is Atlantis. So it's my mantra is, from Atlantis I began this journey, and to Atlantis I have returned. In my book, Atlantis Rising, the Syrian High Council describe, and I hope we'll get into that more, they describe how Atlantis was a huge continent. And the debate is on at all times where, how, what was Atlantis. But it makes complete sense to me that what I gotten from the Syrian High Council is right, and that is that it was a huge, huge continent that went all the way from Iceland all the way down to South America. And, you know, we've got the North Atlantic Ridge in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean, where at some points it's so shallow ships can't even pass there. So I understand that to be Atlantis and the mountains of Atlantis, and it explains also why Atlantis, at first of all, was so vastly important in so many civilizations, and how we very possibly can explain why you've got the exact same pyramid structures on both sides of the Atlantic for China, Egypt, Mexico, with the same ziggurat type pyramid structures and the mighty, magnificent pyramids that you see in Mexico and Egypt. Wouldn't it make sense?
Yeah, and how sorry, Patty, how many years ago would you be putting this ancient civilization at, in your reckoning?
Well, in my reckoning and understanding, Atlantis existed for 100,000 years. And so when people talk about Atlantis, they talk about 2,000 years ago, the Great Flood and yada, yada. But that would be the decline of Atlantis, or the defeat of Atlantis. But we need to just contemplate for a minute if, in fact, Atlantis was a civilization that endured for 100,000 years. Let's hold that up to what, 200 years in the United States, a few thousand years in most other civilizations, and the extreme valleys and peaks of our society, civilizations, and then try to imagine Atlantis existing 100,000 years. It boggles the mind. It also helps explain why more and more we're seeing artifacts that, for example, Göbekli Tepe, which you may know about in Turkey, predates anything we've ever seen in temples. I'm not suggesting that's Atlantis, but more and more, especially at this time on the planet, archaeologists are uncovering parts that define the historic timelines. And so my understanding of Atlantis is that it was a 100,000-year civilization filled with peaks and valleys. The councils say you build up your civilizations to a mighty peak, and then you tear them back down, and you build them back up. That is the nature of human nature. It's kind of mind-boggling to think of 100,000 years and what that entails as far as society, species, industry, technology, of course, which when we talk about Atlantis happening again, which we are obviously talking about these days, we're talking about once again reaching that insanity of technology that destroys, that can be used to propagate a civilization to a higher plane, can also destroy. And in Atlantis, it destroyed. It brought the civilization to a peak, and then it started to be subverted, to be used against the people. And I believe that's why it came down, because there was some sort of divine intervention that made sure that it couldn't continue to function in that way.
Yeah, and I do get the feeling that some of these time cycles definitely play out on a loop, and that it's like until we figure it out and find the way out of the loop, it's like we're destined to keep repeating it over and over again.
Yeah, until we learn our lessons, whatever they are. And one of them surely is the evolving species of humanity that seems to get dragged down. We like to blame it on the reptilians and whatever other dark stuff gets categorized as the reason for it. But the bottom line is we human beings have a responsibility, and our responsibility is to create beauty.
I agree. Yeah.
To live in love. And if we aren't going to be doing that, we're going to keep what you said. The loop will continue until we mature and graduate out of this polarity into love consciousness.
And when you talk about Atlantis being like 100,000 years or perhaps even longer, who knows, but at this 100,000 years, do you see it as a civilization where people were also living longer? Because we have a lot of stories that, you know, we have all these mythologies like Anunnaki and Sumerian kings, and we have the biblical tales, and we have all these tales of like giants and people with very long lives. How would that relate to Atlantis? Do you think they were living longer back then?
I do. And before I get to that subject, I'd like to insert here that, you know, it's not legend about the giants. They're finding these gigantic skulls. Have you seen what they just pulled up in Ecuador?
Yeah, I did see the giant skeletons. Yeah. I love the giants.
The skulls are bigger than a Volkswagen Beetle.
Yeah.
You know? So, and then of course, when you go to Peru and you walk up those giant steps at Ollantaytambo, I think it's called, you ask yourself, you know, who walked up these steps? These are for giants. But as far as Atlantis, yeah, it's not very far-fetched for us to imagine that throughout, again, it is hard for us to imagine 100,000 years. We just look what we've done in 20 years. 20 years ago, there were no cell phones, right? How different life was, how different people thought, how differently our emotional bodies were comprised energetically without that interference. So as far as living longer, it makes real sense that at different times in civilization, we've had different lifespans depending on disease, technology, food availability, pollution, all these elements. But when I speak about Atlantis from the point of view of the Syrian High Council, or my channel, the early days of Atlantis were the ultimate pure existence on the planet. They call it the nest for different races to be brought into a matrix that was then defined as the human Homo sapiens.
Okay, because a lot of people see this planet currently as like a prison world under quarantine, that we were just brought here as some kind of prisoners in some sort of slave matrix. It's all very doom and gloom, as if that we don't have any choices here. How do you see that? Do you agree with that? Or do you think that this was more of a intercultural experiment, perhaps, where a kind of different meeting place for different types?
Really wonderful questions. I don't believe in the no-win scenario.
Me neither.
So, you know, I'm a James Kirk fan, and, you know, the famous line about the Kobayaki mirror experiment, when they asked him how did he beat the game, and he said, I don't believe in the no-win scenario. So I am never going to be a slave, ever. Because you know, you can buy into that, and there are plenty of people bringing forward the most horrific information ever about just about everything. And one of those is dark ETs are going to eat the babies, and there is a lot of trouble here, okay? But that we are powerless before this reptilian system that is only using us to harvest us, I don't buy it. Although we seem to be a good job of harvesting each other.
Yeah, they might want us to believe that, though, so we feel completely unempowered. See, I'm always wary of these just complete doom and gloom, no-win scenarios, because then you just feel apathetic.
Yeah, the job of the light worker, in my opinion, and anybody who wants to live a sane life, is to find a meter between these extreme polarities. We do know that at this moment on planet Earth, we are witnessing extreme, really extreme duality.
Yeah, hyper duality.
I mean, big time. And I feel that this is part and parcel of our evolution out of this state. So when I talk to people and lecture, whatever, I'm trying to help people understand that to be fearless, to look at the dark. I don't like to dwell on it. I don't live in it, but look at it enough to be informed about it and know that by understanding it, even if you don't understand how anybody could be that way, understanding the mechanism of it helps you raise it up. And the Syrian High Council say it's easy to be light workers when you're shining light into light. That's a no-win, no-brainer. But when you've got to shine it into the darkest corners, that's a challenge that only light warriors and light workers answer to the call of.
Yeah, and I'm pretty sure that that's why there's so many people on this planet right now. It's no coinky-dink, as I call it, the fact that the population's been going up, because I think people have just been pouring in from all over the place to come here right now at this point, and I can't believe that that was just for no purpose, so everyone could just be enslaved in some doom and gloom future thing.
I know. If you think that there is a cosmic reason for everything in the world, in civilization, in the galaxy, and I do, I believe there's a common divine imprint to existence, then there's no place where it fits in my consciousness that the purpose of all of it is suffering, torture, disease, and disempowerment. So, just like the Bible and any other religious book was written by humans declaring itself divine, so it is that people are taking charge of all the rhetoric about the dark force that's ruling the planet and what's going to happen to us. And I don't, buy into any of them. I know what I feel. I know what I experience. I know that my focus is on growing those tomato plants. I can't wait till my first baby comes out. Dolphins are out there in the ocean. I can't wait till I get out there again, and seeking to make my life, my every moment, as valuable as possible. And to be of value, I seek beauty. I seek joy. And I'm more than happy to analyze and examine and discuss all the darkness, because it's my job. I feel it's my mission to help people understand it and let go of their fear of it, because knowledge helps you release your fear. It's the unknown that terrorizes us. Just look at this vaccine, the virus, our friend the virus here, and the insanity, utter insanity of the unknown. What's going to happen to us? What if we can get under control? Oh my God, that unknown, perpetrated by people who want people to be disempowered, is insane. And yet it's what fear is based on. And excuse me for running on, but I look sometimes at fear, it's like a bicycle pump. And it starts out like, oh my God, I shouldn't have done that. I hope I don't get in trouble. Oh my God, what if they find out that I made that telephone call long distance at the office? Oh my God, I'm gonna get fired. Oh my God, what if I get sued? That's how fear acts. It's in your mind, it becomes such a giant, such an ogre, that it loses its dimension, where you can shrink it back down and cope with it. Hold on a minute here. What have I got here? I made a mistake. I'll go to the boss and say, I used the phone long distance. I didn't realize it was illegal. May I please pay for it? Fixed. Right?
Yeah, quick solution.
Yeah, honesty and truth and integrity.
Truth conquers fear. Truth
Absolutely.
conquers fear. Yeah.
And integrity.
Yeah, and integrity is very important in life. And
Yes.
Before we get on to too much of a different topic to Atlantis, actually, I know you know a little bit about the crystal skulls. I have to admit, I'm quite a novice about the crystal skulls. I mean, I've seen people talk about them, but could you share a little bit of your knowledge on the crystal skulls?
Oh boy, it's a big topic to share a little bit of. So here's my book.
Share a big amount on it then. Yeah. Oh, do you have a book? Show us that lovely book of yours, Patricia.
One of my earlier books. It's called Atlantis Rising, Struggle of Darkness and Light. And it delves, and don't I just open to the Skull Committee chapter.
There you go.
Gotta love it. And it discusses in depth at how in Atlantis, well, it was a very crystalline society. I think we're all comfortable with the idea of the interaction of Atlantis with priesthood that worked with crystals and eventually the whole civilization. But in Atlantis, they were gifted through higher beings that we'll call interdimensionals or extra dimensionals. And they were given this incredible gift, which was 12 crystal skulls that served as they were materialized. They crystallized from another dimension into the form of the human skull. And the understanding of that that I have in the book and from the council is that it opened a portal, a gigantic portal, into multi-dimensional connection with many civilizations and beings. And when these 12 skulls were put together, a 13th skull would appear. this is going to be important when we talk about the Mayans, so let me just spell this out. A 13th would appear, which would be non-physical in form. It would be holographic in form, triggered by the union of these skulls. And it would be the master that would trigger the opening of this portal, which sounded pretty far out 20 years ago when I channeled it. But actually, it's getting more and more realistic to envision that and understand how that would work. Mm-hmm. Always remembering that all of our technology is based on crystals. Mm-hmm. So at the time when people say, well, that's pretty far out, Patricia, I'd say, really? Because the whole computer industry, ports, cameras, all of it requires quartz. So is it really that unreasonable to think that it was being used in an ancient civilization in a different form? The crystal skulls instead of a computer screen, is it really that different? Which is
and maybe the human is the computer that we use the crystals with, because, you know, we get further and further into this thoughts, especially people that are atheists. You know, like I see people like Elon Musk, their dream of immortality is that they put their consciousness into a machine. But I imagine if you were from a time that was more advanced or still hadn't kind of fallen quite so far away from itself, you would have, maybe the technology would have been something looked maybe more basic, but would have been more powerful, because we would have been perhaps using our consciousness with it rather than just a computer or a machine.
Yeah, and that's what the council said, that we interacted, the priest had interacted with these crystal skulls. The people also interacted in prayer and meditation, group meditation, lots of use of sphere. And one of the lifetimes, I want to show you the book cover again. In my most important lifetimes that I had was when I was the overseer of the underground generators. They called them the mind light generators. So here's this picture of this little boy with the priestess. That was me. And in these underground energy stations, they had gigantic crystal spheres sitting on top of these, something like orichalcum, which you know what orichalcum is?
No.
Orichalcum is referred to by Plato when he talks about Atlantis. Mm-hmm. It was an alloy that was like gold, but it had quite a lot of copper in it. It was exclusive to Atlantis.
Okay,
and
right.
Very exciting, because they just about 6 months ago, they found a ship off of Sicily, and they have found artifacts that are made of orichalcum, which have never been seen before.
Wow.
Yeah, I want to get there and touch those rods. But at any rate, underground, there were these, and it was a difficult lifetime for me, because I was underground a lot overseeing these generators, the mind light generators. So basically, people would go to prayer, meditation, very devout spiritualism in Atlantis, and focused intent big time. And they would pray, and they would send conscious intention thought into this device, and it would travel up the spiral and illuminate the crystal. And by doing that, they according to the council, for many, many decades, no, it's not decades, come on, Pat. Every so often I just lose it.
Centuries.
That's the one.
Millenniums, eons.
For many centuries, they actually lit up the entire continent by using these devices. Mm-hmm. And then it was subverted by the dark priesthood, who started to say, well, hey, we can use this energy for our own purposes, not unlike the mind control devices that are being used on humanity right now. Mm-hmm. So this is why we talk a lot about Atlantis is rising again, because we're facing the same challenges again. Runaway technology and the abuse of it by dark warriors.
Yeah, it's so true. And when people talk about the returning of Atlantis, do you think they're talking more in a metaphorical sense, as in just repeating cycles? Or do you think because I thought some people believe that it's actually Atlantis is going to rise out of the sea again, like an actual return of Atlantis. How do you see that?
I believe that we're talking about metaphorical and metaphysical sense of the return of the Atlantean paradigm. But that said, we certainly see islands going up and down. And with the way that we are affecting the global climate, and how that affects the oceans, it's not unreasonable to think that suddenly an island will appear. And I don't think the whole continent, because that would completely throw the whole planet off. If the Syrian High Council are right, and this was a continent that had that proportion, then for it to rise would be probably the most destructive thing we've ever experienced.
Mm-hmm. And when you talk about the Syrian High Council and a connection that you have to this group, could you tell me more about that? Because I honestly, I don't really follow channeled work usually, but I'm quite interested to know, how did you come about that connection? Is it linked to a past life? And yeah, if you could just explain that a little bit.
Okay, well, I'll tell you, for starters, I don't usually follow channeled material either. So I am not a skeptic, but I'm very cautious when I hear people talking about.
Yeah, me too.
So
me too.
Very
general,
cautious.
yeah.
And what I can just say about that is, fortunately, I started getting this information 20 years ago. And over 20 years and 14 books later, the material is always right. And there are very factual things in these books about problems that we're facing now, the challenges before the human race, our coming here, what it means to be, choosing to be a soul that comes into body, etc. Stuff that we love to talk about, right?
Right.
And how it came about is that in 1997, I was taking a color therapy course in England, a pretty intense one. It was a college, it wasn't just a weekend workshop, it was a college for color therapy. And I had a dream that I was flying over Stonehenge. And when I looked down, I saw this gigantic spiral in the field. And I woke up and I heard a voice say, pay attention, this is very important to you. This is an interdimensional connection point, and it's going to be very important in your work. And I woke up, it was 4 o'clock in the morning. I had no clue what. And it was funny because it was a college in the countryside in England. So I was in a dorm situation. So I was in my little bunk trying to make notes about it so I wouldn't forget it, with other women sleeping in the room. But at any rate, that morning I started to talk about the dream because it was so vivid. And one of the professors overheard it. And he said, you're describing the crop circle at Stonehenge. And I said, what's a crop circle? Because at the time, I hadn't really acquired a knowledge about crop circles, which since then I've gone pretty much every year. I've been in hundreds of crop circles. But I didn't really understand it that well. And then we went to, let's see, from there we went to Glastonbury to have the weekend off, and sitting in the middle of this bookstore, there's this gigantic poster of Stonehenge and the exact same spiral that I saw. So when we got back, the professor said, look, Patricia, you're obviously here for that. I'll take you. And he was kind enough to drive me, I don't know how many hours, to get into that crop circle. And when I did, I've got lots of astral journeys under my belt. I've had new past life experiences all the time and memories. I have never had a thing like this happen before. I fell into the circle. I started spinning. I thought I was going to throw up because it was really fast spinning. And the energy was, oh my God, like nothing I think I've ever felt. And as I was spinning, I started to lose the sense of being physical. I heard music. It got louder and louder and louder. It was whirring. And then finally I popped out. And I was gone for over 2 hours. So when I came back, this man, a few people were standing over me. I was sprawled out in this crop circle. It was much darker because it was 2.5 hours later. And I had no idea what had happened. And when I said to the professor, oh, I'm so sorry. I actually think I've lost consciousness for a little few minutes. He said, 2.5 hours, you've been gone.
It's great that they actually left you in the crop circle to just experience it and didn't just freak out and call the medics and sort of ship you off to.
I know, right? But then again, you are talking about, the metaphysical people.
Yeah.
They're plugged in. And he had gone over to Stonehenge because he was more into archaeology. So he left me. In fact, he was a chattering box. I remember saying to him, I need to kind of be alone here for a minute. He said, well, I'm going to go over to Stonehenge and I'll come back in a while then. So when I came out of this whole experience, I got back to Rome It was about 2 days later. I was very disoriented because it was just amazing. I couldn't seem to get back into that grounded. And speaking about channels, I'm an extremely grounded person. So it just didn't fit with me. I don't like mediumship that much. What? But I woke up in the middle of the night and in a sort of a trance, I typed out these pages. And when I read them, they were the beginning of the first book that I brought through called The Cosmos of Soul. And from there, it's been book after book after book of information. And the source of this information is, in my humble opinion, some body of individuals of consciousness that I'm able to tap into. And let's get rid of all the glamour and the images of these lioness type of beings and all of the caricatures that we make out of what we perceive ET and extra dimensional beings to be. All I see is light beings, just light. And then these rushes of information. And a lot of it is very quantum physics, which I have zero training in. I'm in a Bachelor of Arts kind of mindset. So precise physics that people say, are you sure it's just not coming from your higher self? I go, great. I don't care who it's coming from. The fact is, I'd love to possess all this wisdom, but I don't know. At any rate, over the years, it has been defined as the Syrian High Council. And it's 14 books later with this information. So that's what that is about.
Wow, it's so interesting because, crop circles are very powerful places. I've heard of many people having massive healings and all sorts of things. And people think of England as, the Queen of England's little, London, but it's actually full of power spots all over. That's why they live there. That's why these people live there and how they've managed to make this empire.
Yeah, that's right. You've got the ley lines, first of all, the Michael Mary lines all intersecting there. You've got all the stone circles, all the druid lore. I mean, just it's incredible, the energy in England. Yeah. And I understand crop circles in a certain way, and that is much of England has a very high watershed. So it's an island. And so crop circles, I think somebody said it's about 90% of crop circles come down in a certain part of England where there's a very, the mantle of the earth is rather thin because it's over water. And so my understanding is the water is the magnet, the feminine, pulling in the electric energy that whatever, you can call it ET, you can call it, you can call it ETs with their laser beams, you can call it extra dimensional consciousness.
I don't see it as ETs. I see it as some kind of living energy, like plasma, because I've seen the videos of the plasma balls creating the shapes over the fields that I know Patty Greer
but what's
showed
behind that has to be a conscious intention. So
I've always seen it as the planet. I've always seen that as the planet. Do you think it comes from external?
I think there's an dynamic between planet Earth, Gaia, and some form of intention, focus, consciousness that is sending, beaming. Let's, for example, just for the sake of moving forward in the conversation, let's suggest that it's some higher form of consciousness, even the human collective, beaming, using that, somehow having a mechanism to beam down a sacred symbol. Okay, just for the moment, and then I'll elaborate on that. So the intent is to send down a tetrahedral platonic solid image into the ground, all right, into the earth, for reasons that would have to be communicating intelligence. But that's the only thing that makes sense to me, is something is communicating intelligence that is intended to be reflected in Earth's, Gaia's fields. So something that we will discuss shoots down this radar beam, laser beam, for example, and then the vehicle would be the plasma balls, light balls. The vehicle of transmission of that intention would very easily be, instead of a laser beam, plasma that is being directed to create that impact, that image. And then the earth mother, water, is magnetic. That is electric. That's how everything works.
Mm-hmm.
So it's the electromagnetic biological information highway that comes from some source, utilizing plasma, utilizing light, whatever that vehicle is. And then the earth, the water underneath this land, pulling it in magnetically, and then the crop go down.
Mm-hmm.
Now, whether or not that is, I'm not big on the, actually on the ET idea.
Mm-hmm.
It feels more to me that there is a galactic, cosmic earth connection between earth and something else.
Mm-hmm.
Could be planets, could be the sun, could be anything. But the one thing that you have to acknowledge, aside from the it's really human beings with a plank idea, is that something, some consciousness wants to communicate sacred geometry to this planet. And I believe it's to awaken people to the possibility that we are connected to source.
Yeah, I agree with that. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you just saw the latest crop circle at the beginning of the season, just came out. It's like a circle that looks like angel wings almost going up with a heart in the middle that looks like a pendulum, but it's dead center. So it's like heart centered. It's like, you know, we were talking about the swinging duality of the extremes of the pendulum. I don't know why, but it made me think about that being heart centered. It's been the first.
I love that. When did it come out?
I think I just saw it today, this morning. Someone shared it.
Oh my God, that's great. You know, usually I go every year.
Yeah.
And I've always taken groups there, and we've done night watches and had some remarkable experiences. But this year, needless to say, we're not allowed.
No, I know. Yeah, I'm going to be interested to see what the crop circles have to say about everything. And already off to a good start there with that heart-centered angel kind of image. I mean, perfect. It's what we need.
You know, I just want to say that, you know, obviously you know a lot about crop circles, so probably your audience does too. But if they don't, there's a lot of information out there for people to see, and that people need to know that even just looking at some of these images triggers incredible things. Helps really the activation of the pineal gland. So there's lots of research out there you can tap into if you're interested.
Definitely. And so you before you developed this crop circle phenomenon where you began channeling or connecting to it could even be like interdimensional parts of self or other aspects of family.
Yeah. Let's get rid of the channeling word so that it's not an interfering mindset.
Yeah, but this idea, because I mean, I think we all have other aspects of self, and we've all come from other places, and I do feel like we have cosmic family, not just family here, and sometimes even the families we're in here, maybe we've never even been a part of that family before, and we have this sense of another family perhaps that we're even a part of. For some of us that haven't, perhaps, you know, we might have left our true home and come in this lifetime. And so me personally, I don't really have any past life memories of Atlantis or Lemuria. This is why I'm so interested to talk to you about it, because I kind of feel like I came from somewhere completely different, and this whole planet is a little bit alien to me at times. But so you went through this process, and where did the shamanism and the journeying in South America come? Was this after you'd had this experience with the crop circle, or was it before? Because I'm very interested in your shamanic aspect too, because being kind of shamanic myself and having a great respect for the Mayans and their whole cosmology with the Mayan calendar. And I love the fact, I love my red resonant dragon birth glyph that I have with them, and so I'm very interested in this, and I know you've had some connection to the ancient sites over there. So one, did that come after your connection with the crop circle? And two, how did that look? Could you unpack that a little bit?
Sure. Okay, so 1997 was a pivotal year for me. Everything blew open. I was operating the first New Age healing center in Rome called Lightworks. And I was doing things like readings and psychic healing and teaching a few workshops or whatever. And I took a group of people to Tibet as I call it SoulQuest Journeys. And in Tibet, I had complete recall of these temples. I went into the Potala Palace, and I encountered a little boy monk who we locked into each other. We knew each other. Lots of these very powerful encounters were happening. It was like boom, boom, one after the other. And then I went twice to Tibet in 1 year, which is like in a lifetime. It's already a miracle because I kept feeling this. To start with, I think shamanism, they're all forms of shamanism and doing shamanic exercise and ritual. But in my humble opinion, shamanism is simply walking between the worlds.
Mm-hmm.
And then
Yeah.
I've been doing that all my life.
Mm-hmm.
So that there are times in my life when sometimes I'm not quite sure which reality I'm really in. You know, that's why I say I'm very grounded, because when you're seeing other dimensional experience, you've got to be sure you can ground yourself into where you really hold resonance, which is
Mm-hmm.
this lifetime for the moment. So everywhere I started, and my thirst for knowledge was incredible. My whole life became dedicated to knowing more and more and more. And each step started rekindle that innate knowing. In Tibet, for example, this monk at one of the temples told the guide, "Who is this woman?" Because I knew everything. I knew what the temple looked inside. I knew that there was a secret chamber. And this old monk said, "Nobody knows this except me. This woman has a past life here." And so all of these things were triggering me. And then I went to Mexico. I went to Palenque. What was the first? Oh, I remember. I went to Palenque and Chiapas because I had written Atlantis Rising, and I was planning to start doing more of these trips. That's what it was. More of these sacred journeys for people. So I went there, and the tourism office offered me a free trip because I was going to bring groups. So that was nice. So they took me to Chiapas, and we go to Palenque, and I asked him if I could get into you're going to love this, into the tomb of Pakal, which is completely closed. Don't even discuss it. Can't happen. So when I asked him, he said, "Mrs. Cori, I have not even been in Pakal's tomb." And he said, "I'm the director of tourism." He said, "That is a no-go." So he said, "Please do me a favor, because I asked for private access to the grounds, which I always do. I like private access. I want to be alone in the energy." And he said, "I'm asking and receiving private access rights for you to be in there after the grounds close, but please don't mention the temple." I go, "You got it, no problem." So we get there, and the woman, totally plugged in woman, posing as the tour guide, leader, or protector of this, whatever her title was, of the Palenque. She looks at me, she goes, "Welcome, Mrs. Cori." And I say, "Oh, thank you, welcome." And he leaves, and she says, "So what are you here to see today?" She's communicating this to me. I said, "Oh, I just anything. I mean, I just really grateful to be here alone, because for me as a psychic, it's kind of important." She goes, "Do you want to go in the tomb?" I was like, and this happens to me all the time. The gates open, and I didn't know how to answer. I was concerned that he might think I stimulated the conversation. I just couldn't believe it. And she said, "I want you to know that you'll never be able to tell anyone that I let you in there. But I know I've read your book, Atlantis Rising, which did come out in Spanish." And I was just like, here in the jungles of Palenque, this woman has read my book? How exciting is that?
Yeah.
So I got into Pakal's tomb. And, all of these things charge you up. Every time you go to a sacred site, you get these immense downloads, and they just accentuate already what you're gifted with. So I was down there alone in Palenque's tomb, and we're talking about the famous Mayan drawing where they call it the astronaut.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That's Palenque, and that's the lid of his tomb coffin. So I was down there just getting charged away, and then from there I was greeted a couple of days later by the guardian shaman. And you know how shamans are, they're tricksters. So he came out, and he was dressed in a white tunic, because the last tribe of the shaman of the Pigtail line is called the Lokandun tribe. They're the last pure descendants of Pigtail. And they've been reduced to selling t-shirts and stuff like that at the entrance to survive. They all wear white tunics. They've all got, mostly all got long hair. And it's a very long story how I was introduced to him, but basically he says to me, no, it's kind of complicated. To make a long story short, I was introduced to him through another person. He had a vision that somebody was going to come, a woman from the west of the United States, and I was from California. And this guy who was my tour guide for the group said, no, she's not. She's from Italy. And he said, are you sure? He said, she's from Italy. She wants to do a crystal skull ceremony at Palenque. And he said, I've been waiting for her. So when we met, he took me in the jungles. I mean, I look back at this and go, where did I get this, the insanity to just follow this guy in the jungles? I mean, they're real jungles there, right?
Yeah.
To a back temple in Palenque that nobody can go to, only the Lokandun people, and initiated me in a fountain there, initiated me into the priesthood, and had me leading the ceremonies. It was remarkable. And he's, step into your power. We know who you are. I was like, who am I? Kind of, amazing things. And he then appointed me to be one of the 4 guardians of Palenque.
Oh, wow. That's quite an honor.
Very big honor. When he told my group later, the group, he said, Patricia is one of us. She's one of the lineage. And, I've enjoyed this experience in many places.
And do you think that the Tibetans and the Mayans might have had some kind of link on a DNA level?
Absolutely.
Because they have very similar, the Peruvian face, the Tibetan face, because I've also been to Lhasa and Tibet 3 times. As a DJ and singer, performing in the nightclubs there in my other life. When I was an international DJ and I was touring China, I was living in China, and I managed to get hired 3 times. I really wanted to go there, to go to Lhasa, Tibet. And I also had phenomenal spiritual experiences. The minute I arrived, I started just I would do my meditation and I'd suddenly be taken out of body and connecting to the bliss field, and just crazy experiences there. And then when I left and came back to my house in Chengdu, which is where I was living then in Sichuan, they kind of stopped. It was there was something about being in Lhasa that when I was there and I would meditate, it was just so expansive, and I don't even know what exactly the energy is there, if it's the mountains or a portal.
It's millennia of prayer and devotion for starters. When was that, may I ask?
Oh, that was, let me see, it must have been about 8 years ago.
I'm surprised to hear that the energy was still intact, because the Chinese infiltration of the whole valley changed. So when you said there were a DJ there, when I was there in 1986, there was almost nothing. Some Chinese laundry, some Chinese restaurants. It had just started. So years later, when people are talking about restaurants and 5-star hotels, I can't fathom it.
It's been built up in Lhasa to a certain extent, and I have to say I was quite sad there, because you can see how it's about the Chinese culture being instigated there and imprinted there, and everywhere you go they play Chinese music. So you're going to Lhasa, to the Patala Palace, and they're playing Chinese music through speakers as you're walking through the garden, which even as a tourist, it would be nice to have traditional Tibetan music in the garden.
And when I went there the second time, because I had made contact with one of the women, a local vendor there. She was selling beads. I'm sure you saw plenty of them.
Yeah.
And I bought a bunch of stuff from her because she needed it, And when I went back the second time, she saw me, she remembered me. And she, in her attempt to communicate, she said, they keep playing this music. Of all the things, they're beating everybody and assassinations and everything. She said, it's so loud, we used to hear the birds, and now it's 24 hours, we only hear this loud. And I knew that they were deliberately breaking the energy.
Yeah, they
because,
have
you know,
speakers everywhere. They have speakers
yeah,
everywhere.
because I had the privilege of getting up on the top of Potala Palace with two of the monks, and they played the horns. Oh my God. And that sound reverberated over the valley and bounced off all those mountains. It was, talk about a chakra clearing, man. Right through you, you know. And even 6 months later it was, when I went back, and it was destroyed. That magic was destroyed.
Yeah, well, that's the frequency
and, you know, that
control.
Yeah, frequency.
It's the
But
frequency.
that you were still able to feel it, that's wonderful, because it can't ever be destroyed completely.
No, it can't. It can't. You can always tap into it. And I just, I don't have memories like you of going. I didn't go into the Potala Palace. I don't even know if I could by this point. I'm not sure if I was allowed in or not. But I remember going to the. I remember going to the temples and just the Tibetan people just being so warm and loving, and everyone was so curious that I was there. And who is this foreigner? And all coming over with their food to like give me food, and they were showing me how to do their prayer, so I wanted to join in with them and, you know, do whatever they were doing. And they totally like all came over and just like really warmed to me and brought me straight into the group. You know what I mean? They were so warm.
They're just wonderful people. Just, you know, I have such extraordinary memories. I spent most of my time in visiting temples.
Me too. That's
yeah.
all I was doing.
You know, I really, when you asked about remembering past lives, well, when you see a temple and you start to describe it to the T inside, you know, this is what I mean about being a grounded psychic. It's one thing to wax effusive on what you think you're seeing. It's another thing when it's factual. It corresponds to reality, in the material reality that you know, is very powerful, much more powerful than just visualizing something. And it happened over and over again in Tibet. It happens to me in a lot of places. In Egypt, of course, won't even discuss.
Anywhere there's pyramids, basically.
I think that Tibet is probably, this is going to be a big statement, probably the most intense, higher spiritual energy, pure spiritual energy that I've ever experienced was Tibet. But as far as the library of the planet, there's Egypt. It's just, you know, you just kick. I mean, everywhere they turn up another temple. It's just layer and layer and layer and layer. And they'll never stop digging, and they'll never stop finding, because there are so many thousands of years of civilization there. And the thing is that Egypt was dark and light. They did a lot of interesting things with magic that had to do with black magic, as well as white magic, and potions. And then we'll get into the interbreeding with the pharaohs and experimentation. And, you know, when you look at the images of the gods with their bird heads or lion heads or whatever, and human bodies, I always wonder, is this meant to be saying that they embody the energies of that totem? Or is it meant to indicate that they were doing that kind of manipulation genetically, where they were able to create these beings? Right?
Yeah, it's a hard question. I'm sure there's lots of theories on the old images we have. You know, some people think they were spacemen wearing helmets, and the helmets were depicting their rank or station. Some people think that they were alien creatures that had DNA from other animal groups, you know, like dogs or...
Well, we're doing this in laboratories now, aren't we?
Yeah, but that's it. It's not far off, is it? With pig cells and growing livers and ears on the back of mice. And you think, really, we're only just sort of going back to maybe gaining a little bit of the knowledge that we used to have, because people perceive time as, oh, we progress through time, we get more and more advanced. But it seems to me that anyone that knows about ancient sites knows that that's just not true at all, that we were very advanced and then we lost it, and now we're trying to find it again.
Well, and as I said at the beginning, in millions or thousands of years of civilization, you're going to have peaks and valleys. And, you know, I love the expression, you build yourselves up and then you tear yourselves down. And I remember thinking, why does it have to be that way? And the answer was, so that you have something to do.
Yeah, basically, because eternity must be boring if you're not doing anything, right? I mean, what are we going to do for millions of years?
And then, but it's interesting also when you think about this moment in time where so many people are struggling, and, you know, this too it's like, okay, dilemma. We are at our best when think about this, when we're really struggling to resolve a dilemma. That's when we're in our strength. When we're laid back, smoking a doobie, loving the fact that life is great, there's no progress. But when, you as an individual or as a civilization are confronted with gigantic confrontational energy, threatening your evolution, you move into action. And so I believe you also agree that we create these things ourselves, either as a collective or individually. We create these challenges to overcome them.
Yeah, I think
right?
so. And I've had exactly the same thought, Patricia, about how boring it would be, eons and eons, millennia, infinity souls. What are we doing with all that time? I mean, come on, we obviously are trying to create laboratories, games, puzzles to solve learning curves. And yeah, it will be going like in cycles or up and down because it's got to keep us interested.
Well, yeah.
We're not going to play along, are we?
You use the Adam and Eve paradigm, not as a religious concept and not as a realism concept, because it's pretty ridiculous to believe that two humans could have created an entire civilization. But if you use it as a paradigm, a metaphorical paradigm, then if you think about these two just sitting around, sinless individuals, unattracted to each other, obviously male and female, sitting around in the Garden of Eden going, yeah. So bring in the apple, bring in knowledge, wanting more, defying whatever the perception is of what is in the Garden of Creation. Now you've got challenge. Now you've got interaction. And so if you look at Adam and Eve as a dynamic of energy, electromagnetic energy, male-female energy, now you've got an interesting thing to work with, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And again, thanks to the apple, now we have the dynamic of decision-making, thought, challenge, and disobedience.
Uh-huh.
I like disobedience.
Yeah, we have choices.
Yeah, which is where we start out in this conversation, isn't it?
It is.
That, no, we're not a slave nation. No, we couldn't possibly have all decided to come here. If you believe that the soul is conscious and that it chooses when to come in, do you believe that?
I don't believe that we came here just for doom and gloom. I've always felt so positive. Like I felt that there was definitely something here to be overcome. And in my childhood, I had nightmares and I saw evil. But at the same time, I just had this delirious bliss joy thing in the background buzzing around, sort of like a crazy puppy energy, kind of like pushing me forward all the time. And just like you said, doors opening and all these like funny synchronicities and perfect timings and being guided around the world to experience so many amazing things at this time. I can't believe it has no purpose to it.
I believe that we are, as souls, we choose when to come into a material reality. Because I absolutely, at the core of everything I believe, is an understanding of my own infinity and the infinity and immortality of all living things that transform and transmute their energy into some other form, but that life has that nothing makes sense unless it's about the perpetuation of life and the transmutation of it to different forms. So in my belief system, I feel that we are sparks of light, of creation. And we choose to come in manifest form, go through this little tube called physical reality with all of our hardships and challenges and whatever to learn something. And when you were talking about the parents, I can't remember exactly the context of that conversation, but I think we choose the parents, we choose the place, the time and whatever. And that is the ultimate empowerment. Because if I chose the time to come in, I bet you I chose the time to go out. Yeah. And so I'm not afraid because I think, this was pretty much preordained to my specifications that here on this planet, for some reason, I came to learn some lessons, maybe even contribute. And in the meantime, I sure want to make it fun and gorgeous and meaningful. Otherwise, it has no purpose and that doesn't work for me.
No, exactly. And so as we're getting to the top of the hour, I don't know quite how long we've gone, but I would like to switch it up now, Patricia, with your wonderful sensitivities and psychic abilities from 2020 now to 2025. Obviously, we're in a massive transitional period right now. And we all sense it, no matter who we are, we can all sense that transitional period. In your perfect world as the artist and creator of reality, from here to 2025, if you could just paint how it's going to play out, how would you like to see it? And where would we be in 5 years from now? Or maybe 10 years?
Okay, first of all, I don't believe in a perfect world. So let's preempt
Scrap
that.
Then.
I don't believe in a perfect world, because as long as one person is suffering, it's imperfect. So, but in the world and the way that I want to see things evolve, and trust that we're headed in that direction, I think that this challenge that's before us is the ultimate manifestation of what we perceive as Armageddon. And, you know, unlike the biblical onslaught of the horsemen and all that story, Armageddon is the ultimate test before humanity. Are you going to take charge of your power or not? Are you going to stand in your truth or not? And is love going to win or not? And to all of these questions, my answer is yes, yes, and yes. Love wins. Love is more powerful than anything that darkness can do. So right now, I see the fall of the cabal, the fall of this reign of terror that has paralyzed, it's got a claw on the planet. And through the hardship, I'm going to follow this thought out because it's a pretty big thought. Through the hardship that we're in right now, with the idea of being closed and shut down and locked and terrorized and whatever, we also have the positive thinkers are looking at the oceans are clean, the elephants are coming back out of the jungle. I saw video after video of animals that are walking down the streets of cities going,
where's all the humans gone?
Where's all the noise? Where's all the gas? Where's all the, what happened? And you can see them. You can, even if you're not psychic, you can see them. I saw a seagull on a bridge in Rome, which is full of the river, the Tevere is always full of garbage, and they feed on it, right? Looking around, looking down, looking, you can read the mind of this bird going, excuse me, we're missing an entire species here. So in this time, this difficult time, the positive mind is seeing the beauty, the fact that we've been lamenting that the earth is trashed and the ecology, whatever. And then in this crisis, there is so much beauty. Taking the human imprint out for a minute, the planet is healing, big time for starters. There's no oil, nobody's sucking out the oil because there's a glut on oil, nobody's using it anyway. And Earth is resetting the ecological balance. Huge uptakes in certain species like humpback whales. It's fantastic. And I think that we're not gonna, when people talk about the new normal, I hate that expression, I refuse to use it. I don't like the idea of normal at all. What's normal? But what I can say is before this crisis, we're not going back to that. And that thrills me because I think we're going forward, and that what didn't work before, a lot of it we're gonna leave behind. And that in these years, we're gonna see more community, small community collaboration between people, a new kind of economy that maybe there'll be an overlord economy with digital currency and that kind of structure, but more and more people have learned already to do with less. Every day I've got so many people like me are gardening and baking bread and getting back to the earth. And I think that is a huge imprint for what's happening to us. And that from that sprouts a new understanding of each other. Once this whole horrific division of fear passes and annihilation from the virus, I think that we're going to beat out the mad scientists who want to inoculate us with chips. The Elon Musks of the world are going to be, not a big fan. I think they're going to have, go ahead and put your spaceships up. They'll probably be shot down for some reason, because I don't see that, I see this as our liberation. The difficult passage, the final steps to the absolute liberation of life on planet Earth. And it looks good. And yeah, 5 years, that's a reasonable amount of time for this transition to happen. There's going to be suffering on the way. We're not through it. Revolutionizing an entire planet of societies that are filled with corruption and rage and all those lower energies, it's going to take time for people to understand there's a different way to be. Mm-hmm. And we're at the helm of it now.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's like, and until as a collective we really recognize what's wrong here, we're not going to be able to fix it. And I see this period almost as that time of being really shown, the showing of the hands, you know. And I find it funny that there's a President Trump being a card game, you know, and
I love it.
Trumping things and like the showing of the hands. Like I see all the connections between everything, even the names and the words that we have around us.
Which are so important. And I also agree with you, because I keep telling people, he's got a trump card.
Yeah, like a trump card.
Is that, right? He's got a trump card. He hasn't played it yet. And I personally think it's going to be very powerful and very positive. Mm-hmm. And so, you know, yeah, I'm an optimist. I don't believe in the no-win scenario. And I'm here, you know, I'm grateful to be here because I appreciate life. I live on a beautiful island. I chose to be here. It wasn't luck. I got myself here. And the ocean is full of dolphins and whales. And I choose to focus on beauty and joy.
Yeah, excellent.
And if you do, how can you lose?
Mm-hmm. And I think almost like you know, we have the division of the service to others, service to self. I almost find like that service to others as well, it is about beautifying. It's about bringing love, healing trauma, beautifying reality. Whereas the other side would be the opposite, making things more ugly, making things more traumatized, destroying beauty. Whereas, yeah, this striving for beauty, it's not so much like, oh, just aesthetic or let's all look like Kim Kardashian type of thing. It's really about just bringing beauty anyway. Bringing real beauty and joy to everyday experience, to our environment, to our communities, to, you know, to life in general.
And I have to say that in my encounter with people, the most wonderful thing that people tell me is that I bring them hope. And for me, it's hard to imagine, how could you not have it? Mm-hmm. I've always been a hopeful, sunny individual. But to know that my work, I'm sure yours too, brings people hope in a time when it's much more, I want to really emphasize this, just like drama and tragedy in movies and theater, it's much easier to make people afraid or cry or suffer terror than it is to make them laugh and feel joy. It's much easier to grip people with, you know, aliens are working underground to take over the entire, it's like, it's hypnotic. It's got a hook that you can easily get into you. Whereas to help people understand beauty and empowerment, that's different. So it's harder. And if you are able, like you are, and I believe I am, to instill that in other people, oh my God, what a wonderful mission. Let's just keep doing that until we all, or at least more and more people can resonate with that, because that's what changes everything.
Mm-hmm. And to me, even like the terminology we're having with the coronavirus this year of first wave, second wave, and trying to turn these ideas into something scary, I'm even turning that around in my mind as something very positive. It was the first wave of awakening. Maybe not everyone got in there. So then we have to have the second wave of the awakening to catch more fish. And then the third wave is when we're all waving at each other. And that's the third wave. We're like, hi, nice to see you. We're all like,
I love it. Yeah, you know, this whole idea of the first wave, and then they're already talking about the second wave, but we're not out of the first wave because it's all planned anyway, right? And so, you know, I also like to share the idea that if you understand that it is planned, that a lot of things that are occurring around you are planned, then, you know, in a certain way you can breathe more securely, no pun intended, because you know this is not random. This is not chaos. This is order, structured order that looks like chaos to knock you off your feet. Mm-hmm. And if you understand that there is a design to this, and, you know, who's designing it, we probably all have a good idea of, but that the upside of this, like you say, the second wave, is that in the meantime, yeah, okay, bring it on. What's the second wave going to look like? Eventually, we're going to get to the point where we're over it. We got the T-shirt. We're not afraid.
Yeah.
Right?
That's it. Yeah, and it's like almost like sometimes even the shadow, really. I mean, what is a shadow? A shadow is only caused by something else with the light shining on it. So the things that we tend to focus on seems to be the shadow behavior, but a shadow is really only an impression of something else that exists in a higher form and as something better. So the shadow is really only showing you something else that's happening on a higher level. But we're focused, we can see the shadow, but we might not see all the love connections so easy, because the TV on the news is not going to show you, 100,000 people connected hearts today in America as the Schumann resonance peaked, and everyone felt love and connection. This doesn't get onto the news. People coming together, we don't.
The news is not about the news, first of all. It's about mind control. It's the modern version of the mind light generators. Yeah. And you're not supposed to get news. You're supposed to get on your knees.
That's it.
Right? Yeah. But yeah, I agree with you completely about the shadow. And I remind people that you can't have a rainbow without dark and light. It doesn't exist. It's not visible without that. So always remember, don't be afraid to look at the dark. The trick is to be able to acknowledge it fearlessly, and then know that your job, if you declare yourself a light worker, or if you're just simply looking to make the world a better place, is to shine light on that darkness. Look at the shadow if it's there and be fearless of it, and then pull it into the light.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's a lovely place to end it, Patricia. And could you just give us some ways to keep in touch with you after the show? And if people, don't know your website, if you could just give us some of your contact details.
I have a pretty active YouTube channel, but I would have to give you the URL.
Yeah, I will put them in the description box as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So I'd love for them to come and check out all my other videos and this one there. And I'm building it up because who knows how long Facebook is going to allow us to say anything at all. So, but I'm also on Facebook, and my website is patriciacori.com. Easy peasy.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for joining me today, Patricia. It's been lovely to get to know you and to have this chat with you.
I loved it too. Thank you. And thank you for all the wonderful things you do.